The Galactic Council chambers were the most beautiful place Dr. Amy Park had ever seen. Giant crystal pillars rose from the floor to a ceiling that seemed to touch the stars themselves. Lights of every color floated through the air like living things. Representatives from 12 ancient species sat in a circle, their strange bodies and faces watching her with expressions she could not read. Amy stood alone in the center of the room. Her heart was beating fast, but she kept her voice steady. She had practiced this speech 100 times on the journey here. Earth was counting on her. "Honored members of the Galactic Council," she began, "I come to you as a representative of humanity. We have traveled far to reach you. We come in peace, seeking friendship and partnership with the great civilizations of this galaxy." The chamber was silent. Amy could feel their eyes studying her small human form. To them, she must have looked like a child standing before giants. High Arbiter leaned forward in his seat. He was ancient, his silver skin covered in patterns that glowed softly. His species, had ruled this council for 10,000 years. When he spoke, his voice was gentle but carried the weight of ages. "We have received your message, human. You say your people have only recently discovered faster than light travel. Is this true?" "Yes, High Arbiter. We achieved this breakthrough 43 years ago." A sound went through the chamber. It took Amy a moment to realize it was laughter. Ambassador, a massive creature covered in dark scales, shook his head slowly. 43 years, said. "My species mastered space travel before your kind had learned to make fire, and you come here asking to stand among us as equals." Amy felt her face grow hot, but she did not look away. "We do not claim to be your equals in age or technology. We only ask for the chance to learn and grow alongside you. We also offer what we can: mutual defense, trade, cultural exchange." "What could you possibly offer us?" continued. "Your ships are slow, your weapons are primitive, your bodies are fragile. One of my soldiers could tear 10 of your warriors apart without effort." Ambassador said calmly, "Let us hear her fully." But the damage was done. Amy could see the other council members nodding in agreement with. They looked at her with something between pity and amusement. She was a curiosity to them, nothing more. She tried again. "We have reports that a hostile force called the Hegemony is growing stronger near your borders. Perhaps together we could." "The Hegemony is not your concern," interrupted. His voice was still kind but firm. "They would not dare attack Council space, and even if they did, our forces are more than capable of defending ourselves. We have kept peace in this galaxy for longer than your species has existed." Amy wanted to argue. The intelligence reports she had seen painted a very different picture. The Hegemony had been building their fleet for decades. The Council's military had grown weak from centuries without war, but she could see it would be pointless. They had already made up their minds. Counselor, a tall being with 4 arms and skin like blue glass, spoke softly. "Perhaps we should not dismiss them so quickly. They have come a long way." "And they can go back the same way," said. "The Council has standards. We cannot allow every primitive species that stumbles upon engine technology to sit among us. It would weaken everything we have built." Raised his hand for silence. He looked at Amy with something that might have been sympathy. "Dr. Park, please understand, we mean no disrespect to your people. But you are young, so very young. Come back in 1,000 years when you have proven yourselves. Perhaps then we can discuss membership." He paused, and his next words would echo through history. "They are just humans. What could they possibly offer us?" Amy stood there for a long moment. She wanted to scream. She wanted to tell them they were making a terrible mistake. But she was a diplomat, so she simply bowed her head. "Thank you for your time, High Arbiter. I will relay your decision to my people." She turned and walked out of the chamber. The doors closed behind her with a soft sound that felt like a door closing on all of humanity's hopes. Admiral Sam Carter was waiting for her in the shuttle bay of the USS Horizon. He was a tall man in his 50s with gray hair and calm eyes that had seen many battles. When Amy walked in, he could tell from her face how the meeting had gone. "That bad?" he asked. "Worse," Amy sat down heavily. "They laughed at us, Admiral. They think we are children playing at space travel. They would not even listen to our warnings about the Hegemony." Carter nodded slowly. He did not seem surprised. "I expected as much. Ancient powers always underestimate new ones. It is the oldest mistake in history." Captain Laura Hayes walked over from where she had been checking reports on a data screen. She was younger than Carter, with sharp eyes and a quick mind that had saved her ship more than once. "Sir, we just intercepted new intelligence. The hegemony fleet is bigger than we thought, over 2,000 warships, and they are moving toward Council space." "How long?" Carter asked. 3 days, maybe less." Amy looked up. "We have to warn them." "We did warn them," Laura said. "They did not listen." The three of them stood in silence for a moment. Through the shuttle bay windows, they could see the distant lights of Nexus Prime, the great station where the Council made its home. Millions of beings lived there, going about their lives, believing they were safe. Carter spoke at last. "How many ships do we have?" 47, Laura answered, "against 2,000. "Those are not good odds." "No, sir, they are not." Carter looked out at the stars. His face was thoughtful, not afraid. He had not come all this way to turn back at the first sign of trouble. Humanity had not clawed its way from the caves to the stars by giving up when things looked impossible. "They think we are nothing," he said quietly. "Just humans. Maybe it is time we showed them what humans can do." Amy stood up. "Admiral, if you are suggesting what I think you are suggesting, it could mean war." "No, Doctor." Carter turned to face her, and there was fire in his eyes. "It could mean saving everyone who just rejected us, and that is exactly why we are going to do it." He walked toward the bridge, his officers following behind him. The horizon hummed with life around them, and somewhere in the dark between stars, a storm was coming. The Council had dismissed humanity as nothing. They were about to learn how wrong they were. The conference room of the USS Horizon was crowded with the commanders of Earth's first expeditionary fleet. 47 captains sat around a long table, their faces lit by the blue glow of holographic displays. At the head of the table, Admiral Sam Carter stood with his hands clasped behind his back. "You have all seen the intelligence reports," Carter said. "The hegemony fleet will reach Council space in less than 3 days. Over 2,000 warships against a Council military that has not fought a real battle in centuries." Captain Laura Hayes spoke up from her seat near the front. "Sir, with respect, this is not our fight. The Council made it very clear they do not want our help. They called us primitive. They laughed at us." A murmur of agreement went through the room. Many of the commanders had watched the recording of Amy's meeting with the Council. They had seen the way Ambassador had mocked their people. The memory still burned. Carter let them speak for a moment, then he raised his hand for silence. "You are right, they dismissed us, they insulted us, they sent us away like beggars at their door." He paused. "But out there, beyond that border, millions of innocent beings are about to die. Civilians, families, children. They had nothing to do with the Council's decision. Should they pay for the arrogance of their leaders?" The room went quiet. Laura looked down at the table, her jaw tight. "We have 47 ships," someone said. "Against 2,000, that is not courage, Admiral, that is suicide." "Maybe," Carter admitted, "but I did not join the fleet to run from fights that matter. None of you did either." He looked around the room, meeting each pair of eyes. "I will not order any of you to come with me. This is a volunteer mission, but I am going. Who stands with me?" For a long moment, no one moved. Then Laura stood up slowly. "The horizon goes where you go, Admiral." One by one, the other captains rose to their feet. Some looked scared, some looked angry, but they all stood. Not a single commander chose to stay behind. Carter felt something warm spread through his chest. Pride, perhaps, or maybe hope. "Then let us get to work. We have 3 days to figure out how to beat an enemy that outnumbers us 50-1. The planning began immediately. Lieutenant Dan, the young communications specialist, worked around the clock intercepting hegemony signals. Commander Ben Torres, the Horizon's tactical officer, studied every piece of data they could find on hegemony battle tactics. It was Ben who found the weakness they needed. "Their ships operate on a centralized command structure," he explained, pointing to a holographic display of a hegemony fleet formation. "Every squadron takes orders directly from a command vessel. If the command vessel is destroyed, the entire squadron becomes confused. They do not know how to think for themselves." "So we cut off the head and the body dies," Laura said. "Exactly. The problem is getting close enough to the command ships. They keep them protected in the center of their formations." Admiral Carter studied the display. "What about those old submarine tactics you were telling me about? The strategy?" Ben nodded slowly. "It could work. Small groups of ships working together, striking fast and then disappearing. The hegemony has never faced anything like that. Their enemies always fight in traditional battle lines. Then we give them something new, Carter said. For the next 2 days, the human fleet trained harder than they had ever trained before. They ran simulation after simulation, practicing the formations until every crew could execute them in their sleep. The ships that had once moved as individual units learned to fight as one. On the second night, Dr. Amy Park came to Carter with news. I received a secret message from Counselor, she said. The one who spoke in our defense. She says the Council still refuses to believe the invasion is coming. They think the hegemony is just posturing. Carter shook his head. Their arrogance will kill them. She also says that if we help them, there are others on the Council who might change their minds about humanity. Species who are not as proud as or as blind as. Then maybe some good can come from this after all. The fleet moved into position near the Velar system, the first target in the hegemony's path. From here, they could see the distant glow of Council stations and the gentle lights of civilian ships going about their business. None of them knew what was coming. On the morning of the third day, Lieutenant rushed onto the bridge with his face pale. Admiral, the hegemony fleet just dropped out of faster than light. They are here. Carter moved to the main, the display filled with red dots, so many that they seemed to blur together. 2,000 warships spreading across the darkness like a wave of death. All ships battle stations, Carter said calmly. This is it. Laura took her seat in the captain's chair, her fingers flying across the controls. Around her, the crew of the Horizon moved with practiced efficiency. Fear was present in their eyes, but so was determination. Admiral, Laura said quietly, if this goes wrong, I want you to know it has been an honor. Carter placed a hand on her shoulder. It has been an honor for me too, Captain, but we are not dead yet. Although the hegemony fleet began its advance, Council defense stations lit up with weapons fire, but their shots seemed weak against the massive enemy armada. Within minutes, the first station fell, exploding in a bloom of fire and debris. The Council had been wrong. The hegemony had dared to attack, and the ancient powers who had laughed at humanity were about to pay the price for their pride. Carter watched the destruction for a moment longer. Then he straightened his uniform and faced his crew. We did not come all this way to watch innocent people die, he said. All ships engage. The human fleet surged forward, 47 points of light diving into a storm of 2,000. It was madness. It was impossible. It was exactly what humans did best. The USS Horizon dropped out of faster than light traveled directly into the heart of battle. Alarms screamed across the bridge as the filled with chaos. Hegemony warships filled the sky like angry wasps, their weapons tearing through Council defense stations as if they were made of paper. Captain Laura Hayes gripped her chair as the ship shook from a nearby explosion. All weapons online, shields at maximum. Enemy ships are ignoring us, Lieutenant reported from his station. I do not think they know what we are. Good, Admiral Carter said. That gives us an advantage. Commander Torres, target the nearest hegemony command vessel. Let us show them what humans can do. The Horizon's engines roared as the ship accelerated toward a massive hegemony cruiser. Around them, the rest of the human fleet spread out in formations, small groups of 3 or 4 ships moving together like hunting animals. On the bridge of the hegemony flagship, Warlord watched the strange new ships with mild curiosity. He was a towering figure, his body covered in battle scars and decorated with the bones of defeated enemies. He had conquered 100 worlds in his long life. These tiny vessels did not concern him. What species are those ships? He asked. His sensor officer checked the readings. Unknown, Warlord. They appear to be from an uncontacted world called Earth. Our records show them as a primitive species barely capable of space travel. Laughed a deep rumbling sound. Then they have come to die with the Council. How touching. Destroy them quickly and continue the advance. A squadron of hegemony fighters broke away from the main fleet and moved to intercept the human ships. They expected an easy victory. What they found was something else entirely. The USS Horizon fired first. Instead of the slow, predictable weapons the hegemony expected, the human ship unleashed a barrage of missiles and energy beams that struck with perfect accuracy. The lead hegemony fighter exploded before its pilot even knew he was under attack. Direct hit, Ben Torres called out. Their shields are weaker than we thought. Keep firing, Laura ordered. Do not give them time to react. The human ships did not fight like anything the hegemony had seen before. They did not form neat lines or follow predictable patterns. They darted and weaved through the enemy formation, striking from unexpected angles and then disappearing before the hegemony could respond. Commander Tors coordinated the attacks with cold precision. Each group of human ships worked together, focusing their fire on single targets until they were destroyed, then moving on to the next. Hegemony command vessels began to fall, and without them, entire squadrons lost their coordination. On the Hegemony flagship, watched in growing disbelief as his perfect formation fell into chaos. What is happening? How are they doing this? The humans are targeting our command structure, his tactical officer reported. Our ships are having trouble adapting to their tactics. Impossible, they are primitives. Warlord, we have lost 37 ships. Slammed his fist against his chair. Then send more, overwhelm them with numbers. But numbers were not as helpful as believed. The human ships were smaller and faster than his heavy cruisers. Every time his forces tried to surround them, they slipped away and attacked from a different direction. It was like trying to catch smoke with bare hands. The Council forces watched in stunned silence. High Arbiter stood on the bridge of his personal vessel, his ancient eyes wide with disbelief. Who are they? He whispered. Where did they come from? They are the humans, High Arbiter, an aide replied. The ones we rejected 3 days ago. Felt something cold settle in his chest. He remembered the young human woman who had stood before the council, asking only for friendship. He remembered the way he had laughed at her. He remembered his own words, they are just humans. Now those same humans were fighting and dying to protect the very people who had insulted them. Back on the horizon, the battle was taking its toll. The ship had taken several hits and damage reports were coming in from across the fleet. But they were winning. Slowly, impossibly, they were winning. Admiral, Lieutenant called out suddenly, we have civilian transports trying to escape the combat zone. They are heading right into a hegemony patrol. Carter looked at the display. 12 civilian ships, probably carrying thousands of innocent people, were flying directly toward a group of hegemony destroyers. They would be torn apart in seconds. The USS Pioneer is closest, Laura said. Carter nodded. Tell Captain Lewis to intercept, protect those transports at all costs. The Pioneer was a small ship, barely half the size of the Horizon. Captain Lewis knew she was outmatched when she saw the hegemony destroyers, but she also knew what was at stake. All power to weapons and shields, she ordered. Put us between those transports and the enemy. The Pioneer flew directly into the path of the hegemony patrol, drawing their fire away from the civilian ships. For 5 precious minutes, she held them off, her weapons blazing even as her hull was torn apart piece by piece. On the bridge of the Horizon, they watched the Pioneer's final moments in silence. The ship exploded in a brilliant flash, but behind her, 12 civilian transports escaped safely into open space. Captain Lewis is gone, said quietly. Admiral Carter closed his eyes for a moment. Then he opened them again, and his voice was steady. Her sacrifice will be remembered. All ships press the attack. We end this today. The human fleet surged forward with renewed determination. They had lost friends. They had lost ships. But they had also proven something that the entire galaxy would remember. Humans were not primitive. They were not weak. And they would never, ever give up. Warlord watched the battle turn against him, and felt something he had not felt in 100 years. Fear, the battle had raged for 6 hours. The Velar system, once peaceful and quiet, had become a graveyard of broken ships and floating debris. The human fleet had lost 12 vessels, but they had destroyed over 300 hegemony warships. The impossible was becoming possible. On the bridge of the Horizon, exhaustion was showing on every face. Captain Laura Hayes had not slept in 2 days. Her uniform was torn from a console explosion, and there was dried blood on her forehead from a cut she had not had time to treat. But her eyes were still sharp, still watching the battle unfold. Commander Tors' status report, she called out. Ben Tors looked up from his tactical display. He was just as tired as everyone else, but his voice was steady. Hegemony formation is breaking apart. Their command structure is in chaos. Warlord has pulled his flagship back behind his remaining forces. He is hiding, Admiral Carter observed. Good, that means he is scared. Lieutenant interrupted. Admiral, I am picking up chatter from the hegemony fleet. They are confused. Their commanders are arguing about what to do. Some want a retreat. Others are demanding they continue the attack. Let them argue, Carter said. Every moment they waste is another moment we have to hurt them. But even as he spoke, Carter knew they were running out of time. The human fleet had fought brilliantly, but they were badly outnumbered. Their ships were damaged, their crews exhausted. They could not keep this up forever. Laura saw the same thing in the tactical display. Admiral, we need to end this. If we can take out's flagship, the rest of the fleet will fall apart completely. Agreed, but his ship is heavily protected. Getting close enough to hurt it will be almost impossible. Laura stood up from her chair. Her eyes met Carter's, and in that moment something passed between them. Understanding, respect, trust. Almost impossible is what humans do best, she said. I will take the horizon in myself. Laura, that is suicide. Maybe, but it is also our only chance. Carter wanted to argue. He wanted to order her to stand down, but he knew she was right. Sometimes victory required sacrifice. Take whoever volunteers to go with you, he said quietly, and come back alive if you can. Laura turned to her crew. You heard the Admiral. This is a volunteer mission. Anyone who wants to stay behind can transfer to another ship right now. No one will think less of you. No one moved. Every single member of the bridge crew stayed at their station. Smiled despite his fear. Where would we go, Captain? We are in the middle of a battle. Besides, Ben Torres added, someone has to keep you out of trouble. Laura felt tears threatening to form in her eyes. She pushed them down. There would be time for emotions later if they survived. All right then, let us go hunting. The horizon accelerated toward the heart of the hegemony formation. Other human ships formed up around her, creating a protective screen. They moved like a spear, cutting through the chaos of battle toward one target, its massive flagship. The hegemony ships tried to stop them. Weapons fire filled the space around them. The ships protecting the horizon fell one by one, sacrificing themselves to keep her moving forward. The USS Franklin, the USS Liberty, the USS Constellation, each one bought precious seconds with their destruction. On his flagship, Warlord watched the human ship approach and finally understood what he was facing. These were not primitives. These were warriors. Warriors who did not know how to quit. All batteries target that ship, he commanded. Destroy it now. A wall of weapons fire erupted from the hegemony flagship. The horizon's shields flickered and failed. Hull breaches opened across the ship. Fires broke out in the lower decks, but still she kept coming. Laura gripped her chair as the ship shook violently. Torres, do we have weapons? Main cannons are offline, but we still have the forward torpedo tubes. Lock onto their bridge, fire everything we have. The horizon launched her final attack. A dozen torpedoes streaked across the darkness and slammed into its flagship. The massive ship's shields held for a moment, then collapsed. Explosions ripped through its hull, tearing apart weapons systems and engine rooms. On the bridge of the flagship was thrown from his chair as his ship died around him. Smoke filled the air. Sparks flew from damaged consoles. Through the chaos, he could see the human ship still floating before him, battered and broken but still alive. Impossible, he whispered. They are just humans. Admiral Carter's voice came over every frequency in the system. It was not a weapon. It was something far more powerful. It was a choice. Hegemony Fleet, this is Admiral Sam Carter of Earth. Your flagship is disabled. Your command structure has been destroyed. You have two options, retreat now or be destroyed. There will be no other warnings. For a long moment, nothing happened. Then one by one, the hegemony ships began to turn. Without their warlord to command them, without their rigid hierarchy to guide them, they chose survival over pride. The hegemony was retreating. On stations and ships across the system, Council forces watched in disbelief. They had expected to die today. Instead, they were witnessing something miraculous. Counselor was the first to act. She opened a channel to every Council vessel in range. This is Counselor of the people. The humans just saved our lives. They came to help us when we offered them nothing but insults. Are we going to let them fight alone? For a moment, silence. Then one Council ship broke away from the retreating formation and moved to join the human fleet, then another, then a dozen more. High Arbiter watched from his ship as council vessels alongside the humans. He thought about all the things he had said, all the ways he had been wrong. "Helm," he said quietly, "take us to join them." The combined fleet, humans and council species fighting side by side, pressed their advantage. The hegemony retreat became a rout. Ships that had come to conquer were now fleeing for their lives. Laura Hayes watched from the damaged bridge of the horizon as the enemy fled. Her ship was barely holding together. Half her crew was wounded, but they had won. They had actually won. Ben Torres slumped in his chair, exhaustion finally catching up with him. "Captain, remind me never to volunteer for anything again." Laura laughed. It was weak and tired, but it was real. "Where is the fun in that, Commander?" Outside, among the stars and the wreckage of battle, a new alliance was being born. Humans and aliens standing together against the darkness. The Council had called them just humans. Now the galaxy knew better. 1 week had passed since the battle. The great station of Nexus Prime, once a symbol of ancient power and pride, was now decorated with flags from 47 worlds. Human worlds, a reminder to everyone who passed through of the debt that was owed. The Galactic Council chambers looked different to Dr. Amy Park as she walked through the crystal doors. Last time she had come as a beggar, asking for scraps of respect from beings who saw her as nothing. Today, she walked with Admiral Sam Carter, Captain Laura Hayes, and the surviving commanders of the human fleet. They walked as heroes. The chamber was full, not just the 12 council species, but representatives from dozens of worlds who had heard what the humans had done. They stood in silence as the humans took their place in the center of the room, exactly where Amy had stood when she was rejected. High Arbiter rose from his seat. He looked older somehow, as if the weight of his mistakes had aged him in just 7 days. When he spoke, his voice carried none of its former pride. "Admiral Carter, Captain Hayes, Dr. Park." He paused, struggling with words he had never expected to say. "On behalf of the Galactic Council, on behalf of every life saved by your actions, I offer our deepest gratitude and our deepest apologies." A murmur went through the chamber. In 10,000 years of history, the High Arbiter had never apologized to anyone. "When you first came to us," continued, "we saw only what we expected to see. A young species, primitive technology, fragile bodies. We measured you by our standards and found you lacking." He shook his head slowly. "We were fools." Ambassador stood up next. The massive scaled being who had laughed at humanity now looked uncomfortable in his own skin. He could not meet the eyes of the humans before him. "I spoke cruel words to your representative," said. "I mocked your people. I said one of my soldiers could destroy 10 of your warriors." He paused. "I was wrong. Your warriors destroyed 300 of our enemies with 47 ships. They gave their lives to protect people who had insulted them. That is not weakness. That is strength I do not understand." Admiral Carter stepped forward. His uniform was clean now, pressed and perfect, but Laura noticed he still wore a small patch on his sleeve. The symbol of the USS Pioneer, a memorial to those who did not come home. "High Arbiter Ambassador, honored members of the Council," Carter began. "We did not come here for apologies. We did not fight for gratitude. We fought because it was the right thing to do." He looked around the chamber, meeting the eyes of beings from 100 different worlds. "Where I come from, there is an old saying. The measure of a person is not how they treat those who can help them, but how they treat those who cannot. When we came to you, we had nothing to offer. No power, no wealth, no ancient history. You turned us away. But when you needed help, we came anyway. That is who humans are. That is who we will always be." The chamber was silent. Laura saw tears on the faces of some of the alien representatives. Others looked ashamed. A few were nodding with something like respect. Counselor stood up, her blue glass skin shimmering in the light. "Admiral Carter, I move that Earth be granted full membership in the Galactic Council, effective immediately. All the rights and protections that come with such membership." "I second the motion," said another council member. "As do I," said a third. One by one, voices rose in agreement. Ambassador was the last to speak. He hesitated, then nodded slowly. "I support the motion, and I request that a formal alliance be established between my people and the humans. A mutual defense treaty, as Dr. Park originally proposed." Raised his hand for silence. "The motion has been made and supported unanimously. Earth is now a full member of the Galactic Council." He looked at Amy. Dr. Park, would you be willing to serve as Earth's first permanent ambassador to this body? Amy felt her heart swell. A week ago, she had walked out of this room in defeat. Now she was being offered everything she had hoped for and more. It would be my honor, High Arbiter. The ceremony continued for another hour. Treaties were signed. Hands were shaken. Friendships were formed that would last for generations. But through it all, Laura Hayes stood quietly in the background, watching. Later, after the crowds had dispersed, she found herself standing by a window overlooking the stars. The horizon was out there somewhere, still being repaired. They had told her it would fly again. She was not so sure about herself. Admiral Carter found her there. "You should be celebrating with the others," he said. "I know, I just needed a moment." She did not look away from the stars. "I keep thinking about everyone we lost. Captain Lewis, the crew of the Franklin, all the others. They should be here, not me." Carter stood beside her. "They are here in a way. Everything we accomplished, everything that comes after it is because of them. That is how we honor the dead, by living well, by making their sacrifice mean something." Laura finally turned to look at him. "Do you really believe we changed anything? A week from now, a year from now, will any of this matter?" "Look around you, Captain." Carter gestured at the station beyond the window. "Human flags flying over Nexus Prime, our people standing as equals among the oldest civilizations in the galaxy. I think it matters." Amy joined them, still wearing her new ambassador's badge. She looked tired but happy. "There you are. I have been looking for you. The delegation wants to discuss trade agreements and the ambassador keeps asking about human music." She laughed. "I think is trying to make up for being terrible." Laura smiled despite herself. "Tell him we accept his apology, but he is buying drinks for the next century." The three of them stood together, looking out at the galaxy they had helped save. It was not a perfect ending. There was still pain, still loss, still work to be done. But it was a beginning. As they turned to rejoin the celebration, Laura thought about the words that had started everything. The dismissal that had nearly doomed two civilizations. "They are just humans." Yes, she thought, they were just humans. Fragile bodies, short lives, no claws or scales or ancient power. But they had hearts that refused to quit, spirits that burned brighter than any star, and a stubborn determination to do what was right, even when no one else would. They were just humans. And that was exactly why they had won.